in terms of like sort of soft skills or other qualities, to me, passion and empathy are really important. So the ability to see that someone is passionate about what we do. I mean, especially what we do there's a really nice feeling to working at a place like Monster, because it's about helping people find jobs. So if somebody gets that and somebody wants to work at a place that where they can impact people's lives in a positive way, then I feel like they could be a good fit here. And I especially can see that in people's cover letters.
Welcome to the Magnificent Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top marketing experts in the world and keep you up to date on all the changes and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Margaret Magnarelli, and Margaret is the Managing Editor for Content and Senior Director of Marketing at Monster.com, the leading global platform for connecting jobs and people. She oversees a B2B and B2C brand newsroom team of 7 that creates written, video, and interactive content aimed at helping candidates find jobs and helping companies find talent. Her team was awarded Best Content Program for the 2016 Content Marketing Awards from the Content Marketing Institute, Best Blog in the 2017 awards, and she has been a finalist for CMI's Content Marketer of the Year. She's presented on content marketing for Content Marketing World, ANA, South by Southwest, Content Marketing Conference, and PR News. Previously, Margaret worked as a journalist, most recently as executive editor at Money Magazine and Money.com. Other noteworthy achievements is she's written a book on tween idols. She's an expert in all things charcuterie, and she helped define the word snarky. And seriously, she really did. And today we are going to be talking about how Margaret Magnarelli from Monster.com utilizes content marketing to stand out in the job hunting industry. Margaret, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And before we get into all of this good stuff, what's up with the snarky thing? How did you really do that?
Well, I started my career as a journalist and working in magazine journalism, and I used the word in a freelance piece I did for Glamour magazine, and I discovered much later that Merriam-Webster.com uses my quote as a contextual definition for snarky in its online dictionary. So I feel like that's one of my greatest life accomplishments.
That will be a life accomplishment that not many other people can match. I'll tell you that much. I read that and I was like, what? How she never brought this up to me? That is crazy. Well, very cool, very cool. Well, getting into what we I say we're supposed to talk about it, but I love hearing about anecdotal stuff like that. But getting into you have a ton of experience, obviously. Not only do you have experience, you have wonderful experience seeing that all the awards and everything that you've done. But before we get into, your advice and tips and everything, I just want to hear you define what content marketing is in your words.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would guess that you hear lots of different definitions of this across lots of different people. For me, I think I take a pretty broad stance that content marketing is any way that you use messaging across your organization through, the traditional being blog, obviously, but also your social channels, your site copy, sales enablement, customer service dialogues, conversation design, et cetera, and using that messaging to engage with buyers, build relationships, and ultimately drive conversions and revenue. And I think to do it right, you have to be customer obsessed and focused on filling their needs versus serving your own needs as a business. And, the sort of catchier way I would say it is, instead of sell, it's about tell.
Nice. And I like the way you said customer obsessed. A lot of people say customer centric, concentrate on that, but you're saying customer obsessed. And I think that's a great way to put, get your mind right. You got to obsess over here. Before you do anything else, just obsess that way, and that'll help potentially lead not only the beginning and the planning, but all the way as you go through. So what gravitated you towards a content marketing approach as you were getting into this, big biz, you were leading up the marketing for this big business, and, how did you go about that? Like, why did you go about that? Did something happen? Did anything significant happen, or does it just feel right that that's the way you wanted to go?
Sure, yeah. I actually, as my bio said, I worked in journalism for most of my career in the decade before I joined Monster, and journalism is a increasingly hard business, obviously, to monetize. And I felt like, for one thing, I felt like journalism was actually becoming more like marketing. We were serving the advertisers' needs in a way that was not familiar to me from what I learned in journalism school, and I came to sort of realize, like, if I was going to be serving brands' needs, I really wanted to do it for a brand that I cared about. And then I kind of tripped on the idea of content marketing in that way. The other thing that I was seeing was that we were using partners to serve up some content at Money, and those partners were companies, and they were delivering content that was really good and as good as we were producing at Money. And so that also inspired me in this way. And also, my role was increasingly about driving revenue because of the challenges of sustainability in journalism, and thinking about how do we provide added value and ancillary revenue. And it sort of seemed like, once I discovered what content marketing was, it seemed like a very natural next step. And in particular, my journalism career was really focused around service journalism, which is a journalism jargon for how-to, and that's really, I think, one of the best ways to do content marketing, is really to serve what someone needs to know how to do. So it was sort of something I tripped over and just realized that I had a whole lot of alignment with it, and I really believed in it. It was kind of the way I had approached journalism, and so I've taken what I learned in journalism and applied it to business.
So it sounds like your life, the universe led you to become a content marketer. I mean,
yes,
you
all
were
the signs were towards content marketing.
They really were, though. I mean, you were in the journalism world where, as you probably saw, maybe 4 to 7, 8 years ago, that and creative talent and everything else was getting devalued by a ton. You better find a different profession. You ain't going to make money being a writer, right? And then 3 or 4 years ago, or more maybe, but around that, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, how are you going to stand out?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to stand out through fantastic writing. So, okay, writers, you're back on. But you have to be really good, and you got to learn some technical aspects of all of this stuff. But hey, you got a career again, and I don't think that's going to change.
It's so funny because I've counseled so many journalists through this now, where they have the sense that, like, their skills are not useful anymore, or not marketable anymore, and yet there's this entire world inside of companies that's really hungry for their skills. But there is also a skills mismatch where journalists need to sort of sell themselves a little differently to apply those skills to a company. And so that's, I think, the thing that a lot of people have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, whenever I'm talking to anybody who become writers, like, hey, that's fantastic profession, but you need to make sure you understand the nuances of search and the nuances of all this stuff, and look to maybe potentially figure out how to get better at video and incorporate all that. So if you can bring those entire skill sets, you're going to be very valuable. But just writers in general, if you're super awesome, there is a place for you, for sure. So, but it's really funny how you went through all that. You really were set up to be. I mean, it would have been weird for you not to go into this profession, seeing where your career was. So,
well, that's good. I'm glad you could see my future. So.
I'll let you know after the call what you're doing.
What am I doing next?
Yeah, I'll let you know. So, okay, that makes complete sense. It's obviously was a natural transition. So you got started, right? And you got going. I would love for you to take me back to the day when you first were getting going, and believe there was obviously a ton of thought and upfront planning. You're coming in, you're going this new direction. Can you walk us through how you nailed down your plan and potentially, the voice that y'all are going to roll with for Monster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to thinking about that consumer. And when I first started here, I only had B2C to think about. I've only taken over the B2B content marketing in the last 4 months. But, the first thing was looking at what already existed from a company perspective, and how we were already messaging to the consumers, to the job seekers, and looking at the existing brand guidelines that were for advertising, which is obviously different than content marketing in that it's periodic versus real time. But how could I translate that to something that was of the moment? And then also, you know, really looking at like what that consumer job seekers experience was, and how do we provide an antidote to the different challenges of the journey. I mean, I think job search is a journey. We've all been through it sometime in our lives or another, and it is an extremely challenging time for people. It is extremely singular. It is lonely. It is hard on your ego. You find yourself questioning a lot, and looking at those moments and saying, how do we provide the opposite emotions at different points of that journey, and then, you know, and then it was kind of like, how do we what are some of the things that represent that voice to be able to do that? So for example, for me, I came up with, I think, 5 different points that defined what our voice would be in our content efforts, and one of them was that we would always be focused on the first person, on the second person, on you. So using the you voice in the headline or the first sentence of every story, so that the audience knew that, you know, even though this is a singular process, this is we're with you. You have us on your side. So that was an important part of how we would represent ourselves. Another thing was like making the content action oriented and giving people specific tools and dialogue and tricks that they could employ so that they felt smarter and more confident as a result of our brand and our content. And a third thing was bringing humor into the mix, and you know, being, this is a stressful time. You need to laugh it off a little bit, but that humor could not be snarky. You know, we needed something to help differentiate ourselves from the kind of bland service content that's out there. But we were, this was not, it's not on our brand to be snarky or sarcastic.
You're not BuzzFeed.
Yeah, we're not BuzzFeed, and being supportive is most important to us. So so we have to do it in a way that feels authentic to the brand. So that was some of the points that we were thinking about.
Awesome. So I mean, you basically lived what you said at the very beginning. You know, you obsessed about your client base here, and you went from that, and you know, then everything kind of grew. And some of what you mentioned, that yeah, I get to see immediately right when you say it. It seems logical, and I get it. But was there more digging, or where did you dig? How did you dig to kind of find out? Okay, hey, these are what they're going through during this time. Was that already kind of known by Monster, or is that something you did from? You tell me, like digging. Where did you dig to kind of, you know, zero in on that?
You know, it was known by Monster. Monster had done research on it, but also I think we all did our own separate interviewing of people going through the job search process, and talking to people and sort of figuring out what their what they were going through. And there is I think probably like every buyer's journey, there is everyone is unique in some way. Everyone is their own delicate flower, but also there is a kind of a through line to the experience. And so, for example, we know that people tend to maybe feel enthusiastic at the beginning of their job search, and then they like kind of lose a little energy once they don't hear back, and then sometimes they go through a kind of mass apply moment, and sometimes they feel this stress about a black hole. And so like knowing what those moments are, and kind of and continuing to like refine that. Like we've just gone through another customer journey mapping experience where we worked with a consultant who helped us like put it in emotional terms as well. And so being able to kind of revisit those perceptions and expectations periodically, I think is valuable too.
That's awesome. Now, so how did you get everybody aligned? You know, it sounds like, you know, you have a pretty good sized team. You have a gargantuan company. Not sure how far up down the chain everything went as far as, you know, alignment with what you're putting out there, you know, to align with your ad messaging. You know, I'm sure that you know, that played a part. And then the ongoing, you know, you just mentioned some new things came about, you know, and so how did you initially get everybody aligned? And then as you're moving forward, talk a little bit about how you keep everybody aligned, as far as what your suggestion is for how often you meet with your team. You don't want to, you meet yourself to death, right? But at the same time, you have to be aligned. So can you tell me, and from your advice, I mean, you're working with a pretty large department here and huge company. How did you do it? Or how do you do it?
I think, first of all, was getting alignment between what I wanted and actually getting my team to deliver that. So really I focused on that first, and that really probably was the first, I would say 60 to 90 days was me working very, very closely with the team. At that time I had only 3 members of my team who I had adopted by when I got here, and getting them, who had been working under a different boss. Actually, all 3 of them were working under different bosses, and getting them on the same page, and all of us creating content from the same perspective and the same voice. It really actually required me to do a lot of digging in that first period, and it was, at that time, I think of myself more as I was in more of an editor role than a strategist role, even, because I was I had to be looking at every piece of content and making sure that, the headline and the subheadline and the display copy and the intro and the kicker really felt like they were of the voice that we wanted to be putting out there. And I think, it was a hard slog. If you ask the people who worked for me, they'd be like, it was a hard slog that first 60 to 90 days, but then they got it, and I felt like at that point I could kind of set them free to create that content. And then it became more about now we have a program in place, and so it's about conveying what we're doing to other people. And so some of that is, I think content touches so many different departments within a company, and it was very obvious to me, especially because I work remotely from our headquarters, that I needed to have meetings with a lot of people, phone meetings with a lot of people regularly, just one-on-ones, so that they understood what we were working on. So that's one of the things I would say has helped me create alignment, is just maintaining regular communication with peers in different departments.
Mm-hmm.
And also communicating up the ladder through decks. I would say PowerPointing is my least favorite thing about the corporate world, but I think it's a necessary skill to have to use to make your case for things. And so, for example, doing quarterly results decks to management, so they understand what you're working on and what value you're bringing, and I think sometimes people in the C-suite don't always understand what content is, and so I think it is up to you as a content lead to help define it for them and help them understand what it is and what it's doing for the company. So that's kind of how I've created that alignment.
That is awesome. Now, what about when you do bring in new stuff, or as you got going and you felt comfortable? I'm sure you didn't just be like, all right, I'm going to Hawaii now. Y'all take it and run, right? I'm sure you're still, you're not going to be, micromanaging in the sense of looking over each piece of content like you needed to at the beginning. Mm-hmm. What do you do to kind of oversee, just to make sure everything is continuously staying aligned and nothing starts straying off too far?
There are some things that I pay very close attention to, and then there are some things that I pay periodic attention to. And so, for example, we do a lot of updating of existing content, and with that, I don't feel as much need to be involved because I know the woman who's handling it is doing a great job, and I've seen enough of her work to know that what she's putting out there is consistent with the brand. When we're creating new stuff, I will sometimes leave it in the hands. I have a deputy on the B2B side and a deputy on the B2C side, and both of them lead the creative process. And so, part of that is trusting them to, having trained them well enough to trust them to take over on certain things. But when there is a big project, when there's something new we're doing, or it's a big, something that has a lot of exposure potential, then I'm more deeply involved in it. For example, we just did a partnership with Hinunu, which is a company review site that is a partner of Monsters. And we did a package of content with them that was about companies that have the greatest worker satisfaction. And so it was a mix of their data and our data, and we put it out through our PR channels, through our social channels, through paid media and organic, and through our newsletters. And because this was going to have so much exposure, and in particular PR exposure, I really wanted to be involved and make sure I saw every stage of that process and felt comfortable with it. So I sort of focus on, I know I can leave the kind of day-to-day stuff to my deputies, who are great, and then I can come in and be a guide and set terms really for things when they're bigger projects.
So it sounds like you're able to even do that just because of all that upfront work you did put in to get that alignment. Because if you wouldn't have done that, you would have been running around like a chicken with your head cut off.
Yeah, exactly.
So your biggest point takeaways is, hey, get everybody aligned, and then you will be able, just like everything in the world, every business in the world, as you grow, you start taking care of stuff only you can take care of, and those tasks start to grow, and the other stuff, I mean, there's still only a certain amount of time in the day, right? That's not changing. So, no, I hear you.
I think it's a management lesson too, right? I mean, it's one that I still have to learn constantly, but it's like you're doing a good job if you're able to delegate. You know, that means you're teaching the people below you to do what they do well, and to empower them to do their jobs.
Absolutely. And on that note, that means you got to have a good team, right? So how did you go about building your team? Not in the sense of you not utilizing Monster. I'm sure you did. But I'm talking about, what were you looking for? What were you came into a team of 3. Now it's a team of 7. And even with those team of 3, I'm sure they become your team because you said, okay, I need this, 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 and this. Or I'm assuming, you know, as far as skills go, or maybe you didn't. I don't know. But when you were building your team, what were you on the lookout for? What skill sets were you needing?
I mean, I think, so my team is made up of, as I said, 2 deputies who kind of head up the creation of content on the B2B and B2C front, 2 editors who report to them, and a writer, and then a video producer and a content strategist. And the video producer and content strategist straddle both B2B and B2C. And I guess I would say for the people on the creative side, what was really important to me was their creative skills and being able to see their work. I always give people a test when they're candidates for a job for me. It tells me about their commitment to the job and their ability to understand what we do, and their ability to write well, which is the most important thing to me. Like, I think that, you know, and maybe that's not true. The video producer, it's not necessarily that they write well, but that the person can shoot an excellent video. But you know, to see their work and to see how good their work is, like I don't have time to bring in staff that needs heavy editing, and you know, especially not in some of these roles where I need to be able to delegate to them. So that has been a really important metric for me to be able to determine whether somebody is going to be a good fit for this team. I think in terms of like sort of soft skills or other qualities, to me, passion and empathy are really important. So the ability to see that someone is passionate about what we do. I mean, especially what we do there's a really nice feeling to working at a place like Monster, because it's about helping people find jobs. So if somebody gets that and somebody wants to work at a place that where they can impact people's lives in a positive way, then I feel like they could be a good fit here. And I especially can see that in people's cover letters. You know, not everybody submits cover letters anymore, and we at Monster would say you don't necessarily need to submit cover letters, but it certainly can help make your case. And when you do submit a cover letter and you take that extra step to say why you think you'd really like to work at this place, like that means a lot to me.
Sure.
To me, that it says a lot about the person who is looking to fill the role. And then, you know, the ability to be empathetic to to the job seeker. I mean, like theoretically, everyone who's looking for, and the people who are applying for a job should be empathetic to the job seeker experience, but you know, we don't always find that. And so I think that's an important quality. You know, I think that being able to come with great ideas is also exceptionally important, because I don't think all the ideas come from me. In fact, like, I think probably only like 20% of the ideas of this team come from me. Most of them come from the people on this team, and I think that I'm probably like a shepherd of ideas or a doula of ideas, you know. And so so I think being able to see that they can think creatively about our brand is also important.
Awesome. Well, side note for those looking to apply for jobs, you're hearing it from Monster.com. She's saying cover letters are not every day anymore. So if you want to stand out, tell your story in that cover letter. And then from the salesmanship, follow up with a thank you letter. Just saying.
Especially for like you know, the surprising thing is, like, for content roles, like I'm surprised that people for content roles wouldn't submit cover letters, because that's what you're a content producer. You should be creating content.
Yeah, you should be telling an entire story of what they're about to see of your resume, which all look the same, right? So yeah, awesome. All right, let's get into some of your secret sauce now. We talked about how, you know, where your mind was in building your team, how you've kept everybody aligned, how you built your team. Just now you're working with them. Now you gotta do some good stuff on your content story. And I've seen you, I think you created this, if I'm not mistaken, but the How Wow Now strategy. I've heard you talk about it a lot, and I guess let me know if you created this, but I believe that is how you move forward with a lot of your content planning. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I did create it. For me, in my last role working at Money, and we had launched a website for Money in 2014, because Money had been partnered with CNN Money and then split off and started its own website. And what I saw in starting a website in a crowded marketplace at a kind of a late date in web creation was that there were different ways to engage audiences, and that you really needed to think about the distribution of how you were going to get the content in front of people, and that you would want to do different kinds of content for different kinds of distribution methods. So How Now and Wow is the 3-pillar structure by which I think all of our content strategy ladders up to, and I think about it as kind of a portfolio mix in a way. It kind of like goes back to my Money days of thinking about your diverse retirement portfolio, that this is your diverse content portfolio. And How is how-to content, educational content that, you know, informs your audience about something that they need to know related to your brand's offerings or related to the general area that your brand plays in. And I think that kind of content, it can serve two different gods. One is SEO, so there's a kind of on-demand how-to that people need, that people are looking for and turning to Google to find out more about. So for us, that's things like, how do I write my resume? And then there's a kind of clicky how content that is the kind of how-to that you don't necessarily know you needed to know, but if you saw it, you would click on it. So something like, you know, how to deal with the know-it-all in your office. So it's not something that I'm so desperate to know the answer to that I was looking that up online. But if I saw that, I might click on it because I might have had that experience in my own workplace. And so that's the kind of content we would create also for our newsletters and social channels. But the two overlap, and so I think the two kinds of how-to content can kind of play against each other and play in similar channels. Like, both do well for us in social. Some of the SEO driven how-to content can do well for us in newsletters as well. The Now is news responsive or data responsive or trend responsive content. So that's looking at something that's happening in the news or something that's happening in the zeitgeist, or looking at some unique data that we have that feels very of the moment, and being able to layer on Monster insights or layering on the Monster data to a news story. And that you know, we sort of created for PR purposes. We created it for social purposes because you can be part of the conversation conversations as they're happening. So if there's a flashpoint, we want to participate in that. So for example, like graduation, we're creating a lot of content around that time period and flashpoint. Every time the BLS releases its employment situation report, which is a monthly report, the first Friday of every month, we create an article about it, and from the job seeker's perspective, what it means about where you should be looking for a job. So being able to tell stories as they're happening, and it kind of takes the one of the problems with simply going the how route with your brand is that it can feel a little evergreen and almost too evergreen. It doesn't feel fresh, and so bringing in some of the now can help make your brand feel modern and of the moment, and that you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And then WOW is content that is meant to engage on social platforms primarily, but sort of that has that kind of sharing quality to it. So I think of that content as primarily being funny or emotional. So that can be, often for us, it's video content, but it can also be article content. And you know, that kind of gives people that feeling. I mean, I think that there's this kind of like millennial-ish trend. If you look at Instagram, there's this kind of feeling with all these humor accounts that, like, you know, the kind of response of like same and me too, like that you feel when you look at something, and that's what I'm like hope to accomplish with the WOW content. So that's the kind of structure that guides what we do both on B2C and B2B, and you know, it's a fluid dynamic, and it's something we're constantly kind of adjusting and playing with. Like, you know, at times, like, I think, you know, we may have shifted a little more toward the kind of evergreen how content in recent months, and I've been thinking about moving a little bit back to a little bit more of the now and WOW content. And so I think it's the kind of thing, it's an organic process, and we're constantly trying to like get the balance right, and I think it will always be that way for us, but it's just a framework that helps us think about everything we're doing and whether we're serving the audiences well.
Well, let me give you major kudos for coming up with something like that, because, you know, I don't know how many hundreds and thousands of hours that I've either been at conferences or read up on stuff or worked in it or everything, and you took something that is very simple to understand, or you created something that is very simple to understand from a concept that people don't always pick up right away. You know, there's a lot of confusion on, okay, what should we do? But I mean, breaking down the how, well, now, I mean, you're hitting on staying current, you're hitting on organic, you're hitting on what people are searching for and wanting to consume right here and now. And then you're also incorporating emotions through all this stuff with the, you know, the wow and everything. So, you know, to break it down, like, some of the most ingenious things are the simplest things. And yeah, I just want to give you some major kudos on this to come up with that, because you're hitting on so many touch points in helping people if they just go with this without even understanding all the benefits that come from this, meaning the organic, the emotion, staying current, all this thing, you know, potentially hitting different stages of the buying state. Now, you should probably, if you really want to make sure, you definitely need to make sure you have your awareness, consideration, and buying content. But you're going to be touching on those on accident by going this. Well, you know, if you're just getting in and you're just getting started, start with a how, well, now, and then keep learning and understand you got to serve different stages of it. But that's kind of next level thinking. But just if you want to get going, just start here. Now, I would like to touch a little bit more on the wow. The how, very easy to understand right when you said it. Now, very easy to understand right when you said it. Of course, we could probably talk a bit about that, about how you find out everything that's current and all that, but we won't get into that. But the wow, can you talk a little bit more about that? You know, what are some creative things that you've done there? Any ideas that you can help with, and maybe touch on like the very top one or two pieces of wow content that really moved the needle for you all?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about like a pretty vast range of things that we've done in that category, because I think that one is probably the hardest to understand for people, and it is the hardest to produce, because, you know, I mean, if we all knew the secret to social engagement, like, then, you know, then we'd all be millionaires. But
or not have jobs.
So one example, right? One example is something we did about a year and a half ago, I think now, after Kanye West announced he was, I think he said he was $53 million in debt. And one of my writers, and this kind of speaks to like the importance of having creative meetings regularly and letting people throw everything against the wall. One of my writers said, I think we should write an article on that and like write an article suggesting some jobs on Monster that would help Kanye get out of debt. And I was like, well, that sounds crazy, and it's like a little weird for us, but like maybe like.
That's hilarious.
He's a very, very funny writer, and he writes fiction on the side, and has just a really deft touch with humor. And so I was like, why don't you take a stab at it? Let's see what it looks like. And he wrote something, and it was funny, but it was not exactly on brand. It was a little sarcastic, and so I sent him back, and he did another version, and it was good, and it was still the same day that he had announced this, so we were moving really quickly, which is the benefit of having writers on staff. And we published it, and our social team was very strategic in how they shared it on social. They waited until knowing that Mr. West is uses social media as part of his screed, that they were waiting for him to tweet again about it, and they set up an alert so that they would be notified when he tweeted, and then they replied immediately with the article, which meant that we were like among the first to reply in this stream, and we got a tremendous amount of exposure organically for this article, and it did incredibly well. It got like, I think something like 80,000 page views, like organically, and it was,
wow.
And we got, most importantly, we got this kind of feedback on social media that was like, you really made me laugh, Monster. And there was like this one comment that I like screenshot and sent to my CMO that was like, I can't wait to go use Monster now. It was like,
that is awesome.
Great, thank you for doing that, Mom. So that was something that like sort of was a bit silly, and was definitely a risk for us, but worked out really well. And then like another thing that we did was a series called Life After Layoffs that we ran on our site and on Medium, that was a really heartfelt series. First person, this woman who was a creative director in New York, who wrote about her experience of being laid off, and like the journey of like going from the day she got the pink slip and was crying in a hot dog in Times Square to the day she moved 4,000 miles away to a new job, and it was done with this really like a tremendous amount of emotion and raw emotion, and also humor. That what was really important about that was less like the reach it got, but more the micro engagements it created, like the responses that she got of people being like, that really sums up my experience, or like, it was so great to hear you say this, I'm going through it right now. So that was really, to me, like a very a successful way of using how content in a different way that wasn't purely humor. But we've also done things like play off of memes. Like we did a video series that was a takeoff on the BuzzFeed Tasty food creation videos, and so we did like recipe for a perfect cover letter, recipe for a perfect resume, where we were actually cooking up the resume and cover letter. Those have been very successful.
Nice.
We did a kind of a Goofus and Gallant kind of take on new grad job searching called Graduated and Unemployed, that did well for us. So things like that, tapping into humor and emotion, I think, is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give on WoW.
Well, yeah. Well, I think there's another piece that either you're being humble, or maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Is you set your team up to have that flexibility to have that creativity come out. And a lot of times that gets stifled by certain types of organizations or certain types of managers. And it sounds like that's the opposite of what happens for you. It sounds like you leave a bunch of flexibility for people to bring you ideas and to come up with them on their own, rather just, okay, here's our plan, let's not stray, but part of your plan looks like it encourages a little bit of straying, encourages random acts of creativity, basically, right?
I mean, I think my job
that sounds like it's on purpose, if I'm not mistaken.
Totally. My job is really to set the term, but like let the ideas come in, and then say like, this. I try not to be like a person who says just no, although I'm sure I do, but I try to I try to look for how we could take the idea and make it right for our brand, and look at like whether an idea is how much we would prioritize it against other ideas that we have to do. So I see that like my role is kind of in figuring out where those boundaries are and letting us like sort of stray a little bit outside of the walls now and again to see what happens. But but I think, you know, one person can't come up with all the ideas, and I think if you just say like, oh, the content manager or the director of content is going to be the person who comes up with the ideas, you're going to have a very limited scope of what you do. And I see when you bring a room full of people together coming up with ideas, how many different ways you can tell a story. I used to teach a class on how to freelance write, and one of the things I would give to people as an assignment was giving everybody the same press release, and I would say all of you have to come up with one article to pitch off of this press release. And what was sort of beautiful about it was that you had a room of 25 people, and you'd have 25 different stories, and you just wouldn't have any overlap. And so I think the fastest way to burnout is to say one person is responsible for ideas, whereas you can energize people by making it everybody's job.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like I think I know lots of people who probably would love working for you, Margaret. There's a lot of times not everybody's like that. I'll just tell you, a lot of times a lot of stuff is stifled, or you have ego involved, and sounds like you put all that to aside for the greater good and happiness. It's a lot more fun to be creative. Okay, we're running a little bit shorter on time here, so I'd like to just touch quickly on some of the stuff you're tracking and your goals. You mentioned page views, you mentioned this. I'm sure you have your top, middle, end goals that you're paying attention to. What are some of the things that you keep a lookout at, especially as a company as large as yours that, there's a lot of macro numbers going around out there, big numbers. So what are you looking for to help drive your next decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the top of funnel, engagement is key, and so I am looking at those like quote unquote vanity metrics like page views and visitors and shares and impressions, and then getting people into a membership flow where they can be part of our email communication. So that getting them to the site is a big deal, I think, from a first step, because everything happens on our site. We're a brand where we're a SaaS company. It all happens here, so we want to get you here. So and then the middle to bottom funnel metrics that I look at are getting people to look at the job ads. So doing a job search, doing a job, viewing a specific job, starting an application for a job, and again, like getting them into that membership flow is valuable no matter where they are in the funnel. So, yeah.
You're saying membership flow, you mean like sign up for an e-newsletter or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then on the B2B side, so I'm speaking mostly B2C there. On the B2B side, again, top of funnel is engagement, getting them to the site, but then looking for the conversion path within the site. We're currently doing a redesign of our B2B experience, and we're really talking a lot about this now, is like getting people into a lead journey from the site. So first step is getting them into the site, and then second step is getting them to become part of either to take an e-commerce action right away, although that's not likely for every customer, but most importantly is getting them into some kind of a lead gen journey.
Cool. So it really looks like to help drive next content pieces or down the road, you're really looking at engagements, shares, likes, comments, just I'm sure page on time, how much people are spending on time, stickiness, all of that. And then you're also tracking, okay, overall, I guess, quarterly goals, or what you're looking at, there's like email signups, if not maybe sooner than that, but still those are bigger ones. But additionally, you're driving, okay, hey, this is interesting because look at these engagements, look at these numbers, and then okay, overall, is our overall plan working by this? And then, because if you're looking at sales, I mean, you're not going to be able to make decisions in time to sway anything that would have affected a big number. So you definitely got to have those intermediate things that you're looking for. All right, I'm going to have to let you go here soon. Let's see, give me your one piece of advice. If you had to just give one main piece of advice that you want to either reiterate or say new here of somebody looking to implement a content marketing program, what would it be?
Okay, I guess I'm going to give you two. So one is like at the beginning, I think it's really important to take as much time as you can to be strategic. And I would say I probably didn't do this as much as I could have. I wish looking back I had taken even more time to like get information, but I did do a lot of information gathering, sitting down with all of the relevant stakeholders for content, even, you know, not direct bosses, but I mean those peers who work on the distribution channels that are important. So, you know, like SEO and paid media and social media, but also like the product team, because for us, our website is product and content is a product. So talking to everybody and thinking about what their goals for content were and how I could align my goals to their goals. And also, you know, spending a lot of time getting to know the customers. So, you know, if you don't have personas and customer journeys already in place, then trying to help create that, or really getting to know that information, becoming one with it, like pasting it on the wall, start diagramming some stuff. Like that's the stuff that I didn't do when I first got to content marketing, because I didn't really understand it as much, and it sort of took me a little while until I got to like, oh yeah, this is how this is different than journalism. But I would say to anybody who's just coming into a new role, that's really important to start looking at like diagramming at each phase of the journey. What are the themes and what are the CTAs that we want to be pushing, and then you can start creating once you have that like that framework. And then I would say the other thing that I think is really important is empathy. And I mean, I think we can all agree that this 2017 has been like a pretty cruddy year generally, with all these natural disasters and tragedies and political divisiveness. And I think even though as marketers we are constantly being pushed toward being more data and automation centric, and theoretically that like this should all skyrocket our business results, I also think that because of this crazy world we're living in, and because everything is so automated, I really think the human-to-human contact is necessary even more. And so being able to find that connection and to be solutions-oriented, but you know, I think empathy is even even before solutions. It's like it's about before you can even propose the solutions. It's about, you know, saying to your customer that you understand how they're feeling, and listening to them, and showing that you acknowledging how they're feeling, and I think that's a way that we can make real connections with customers in the future.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is plan, and make sure you tie in emotion, which basically means obsess about those people.
Yeah.
And if you obsess about somebody, you're obviously going to get into emotions. So awesome. Margaret, I think you definitely gave away some really good advice today, especially if somebody's just getting going.
I hope I didn't give away all my secrets.
Oh, no, I'll tell everybody. I'll send a link to your personal profile with all your logins and everything. Don't worry. It'll be a link at the bottom of the blog. Well, besides getting all of your login information and everybody else can do, how else can people continue to learn from you?
You can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Occasionally I say things about content marketing there. And I'm always happy to you know, increase my network with other practitioners, because I'm always learning too. And you know, I think I don't feel like it's always the people who are on stage that are the people you can learn from. So I'm really eager to meet all kinds of people doing different things in content marketing.
All right. Well, very, very cool. And just for the listeners, her Twitter is @MMagnarelli. That's @MMAGNARELLI. All right, Margaret. Until next time, and thanks so much.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the latest podcast. Feel free to go to magnificent.com/blog to see the show notes for this interview, as well as those from many other of the world's top marketing experts. Have a great day.